Well, hey there, it is finally summer, and that means that canning season is upon us. That also means that it's time for a little refresher course on canning safety. Because while this isn't the most exciting topic to talk about when it comes to canning and preserving food, it is by far the most important. Because at the end of the day, canning is a science and not an art. So if you are new here, my name is Anna Sikoski, and I am the creator of thehouseandhomestead.com, where I teach people how to live a more homemade, homegrown, self-sufficient life. So the first and most important safety rule you always need to follow when it comes to home canning is to always use a canner. I know it sounds pretty basic, but hear me out. So you always need to use either a hot water bath canner or a pressure canner, depending on what you're canning, and I'll go over that in just a second. But that means no dry canning or oven canning or open kettle canning or inversion canning. So dry canning or oven canning is when you put your food in your jars and you can them in the oven. You use the heat from the oven to sterilize the jars, to kill the bacteria, and to can them. That is no longer considered safe, though they need to go into either a boiling water bath canner or a pressure canner, not in the oven ever. Same thing with open kettle canning, which is basically where you put your food in jars and you put the lid on, and then you allow the heat from the food in your jars to seal the lid on. Yes, it may seal the lid, but it does not guarantee that all of the harmful bacteria in your food has been killed. So this is also a big no-no. No open kettle canning. You must submerge them in a water bath canner, or again, depending on the food type, so I'll tell you about in just a sec, they need to go in a pressure canner. And finally, same with inversion canning. Inversion canning is simply open kettle canning, so that's when you put your food in the jars, and then you actually turn it upside down, so you invert the jars, and then you allow the heat from inside the jar to seal the jar. Again, yes, it may seal the jar, does not kill the bacteria in your food, so big no-no. So all of your food that you're canning either has to be done in one of these canners. So that brings me to the next most important safety rule, and that is that all low-acid foods need to be canned in a pressure canner. No ifs, ands, or buts. So high-acid foods can be canned with a water bath canner. High-acid foods are most of your fruits, your jams, jellies, pickles, things like that. Those can be done in a water bath canner because the acidity is enough to kill off or deactivate any potential botulism spores. And then the heat that you're gonna get from bringing your water to a boil in a water bath canner is enough to kill off any other harmful bacteria that could cause things like salmonella and stuff like that. For low acid foods, so these are things like meat, vegetables, soup, stocks, stuff like that, combination meals, you must use a pressure canner, because only a pressure canner can reach the high temperatures that are needed to kill off botulism spores in low acid food. So if you're not familiar with botulism, it is a very serious, potentially even fatal form of food poisoning that attacks your nervous system. And so what happens is there are botulism spores, the bacterial spores are in everything. They're on our fruits and vegetables, in the soil, they're in the air, in the water, they're on mountain tops, they're everywhere, but they are inactive. And so they're not dangerous to us. It is only when they become active that they produce a toxin that is basically the most lethal toxin known to man. Very, very small amounts can be fatal or have lasting consequences for our health. So this is something that you do not want to risk or play around with. And the thing is that botulism becomes active in a low to no oxygen. It's called anaerobic. So in an anaerobic, moist environment that's around room temperature, which is the exact environment inside a canning jar. Also, it needs to be in a low acid environment. So I should say, so no to anaerobic, low to no oxygen, moist, low acid, room temperature kind of environment. So, like I say, if you've got high acid foods, or if you're canning something like green beans, which are low acid, but you are pickling them, that pickling, the vinegar when you pickle them, that raises the acidity, and it's too acidic for the botulism to form a toxin. However, if you're just canning straight up green beans or carrots or corn or meats or chicken stock or things like that have not been acidified, because you're not going to acidify those things, then they are still low acid, and then those foods are at risk of producing the botulism toxin once canned. So those must be canned in a pressure canner, because a boiling water bath canner is only ever going to hit the boiling point, right? And that's just not hot enough to kill the botulism spores, but a pressure canner can reach temperatures much higher than that, that can adequately kill off any potential botulism spores that are in there, or deactivate them, and then you don't have to worry, and you can safely eat those low acid home canned foods. So that brings me to my next safety tip, which is that there are certain foods that just should never be canned. So the number one thing is dairy. That means no milks, no cheeses, no butters, eggs. Those things cannot be safely canned at home, so just don't do it. If you find a recipe, you come across a recipe telling you how to can milk and keep it on your shelf, or can, a stick of butter, run the other direction, because that is really unsafe advice. You will sometimes see with jams and things like that, it might call for a little pat of butter on top. That's just to help with the foam on top of jam, so that's okay as long as you're getting your recipe from a tested source, which I'll talk about again in just a second. Then that's okay. But as far as like canning up milk or stuff like that, it's very dangerous. Don't do it. Similarly, pureed pumpkin. So pumpkin puree is something that we all love, right? Around the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, get those cans of pumpkin puree from the store sometimes, and you just right out of the can make up your pumpkin pie. So why not make your own can at home, right? Because again, it's dangerous. You cannot can pumpkin puree or winter squash, so acorn squash, butternut squash, that kind of thing. You cannot puree it and then can it, even in a pressure canner, because the puree is too thick for even a pressure canner, the heat, to penetrate it and kill all harmful bacteria. What you can do is you can cube it and then can it in cubed form, and then when you're ready to use it, you just drain out the liquid that's inside and then puree it up and use it like that. That's how we do our pumpkin at home. I've got a recipe I can share with you. I'll link it below. Or if you are pureeing it and you want to preserve it like that, then you must freeze it. There's no safe way to can pumpkin or winter squash puree at home. And then there are things like flour and like pasta and rice, cornstarch, arrowroot powder, things like that. Not so much for safety reasons, but more it's a quality issue. These things break down over time, so you don't want to can these things either. For example, you might be canning up a chicken soup recipe, and you might want to add your pasta, right, your noodles in with your chicken soup. But don't do that, because what happens is in the end, the noodles break down, they get all mushy, you don't want to eat the soup, it ends up in the garbage, and it's a big waste of time and money. So keep the pasta out. You can can up your chicken and vegetables and your stock together, that's totally fine. And then when you want to cook it up, cook your pasta at that time, combine it, you're good to go. Got a beautiful homemade soup in no time at all, because it really doesn't take that long to boil pasta anyway. Same with rice, and then with flour and cornstarch and things like that. Typically you're going to see sometimes older recipes, canning recipes even, calling for things like pie filling to be made with flour or cornstarch or arrowroot powder as a thickener. But these also break down over time, and so what happens is if you can up a pie filling, for example, with flour, like you would regularly maybe thicken it with flour if you're going to make your pie fresh, but you can it, and after a few weeks or months, then that breaks down and it gets clumpy and runny and icky, and once again kind of inedible, and you don't want to eat it, and you toss it out, and it's a big waste. So instead, for pie fillings, what is recommended, the only recommended thickener is something called clear gel. That is the only thing that I use in my pie fillings. They're always nice and thick and beautiful, and even 2 years after I've canned some of my home canned pie fillings, it's still just as good as when it went into the jar. So once again, I will link that below, as well as I will link my recipe for my blueberry pie filling as well, because that by far is the most popular recipe on my blog, and it's no surprise because it is delicious. So I'll link anything that I mention here below for you to check out. So no canning dairy, no canning pumpkin or winter squash puree, only in cubed form, and then no wheat or pasta, rice, flour, things like that. Okay, so the next thing is jars and lids. So you must use dedicated canning jars for your canning projects. Don't reuse like old jars from the store. So things like, for example, this, I've got my salt in it, that's fine, but it's an old Bix pickle jar. do not just reuse jars like this with their lid and pop them on and try to can in there. First off, you cannot guarantee a seal because it's already been sealed right in the store, but also because those are just not the jars that you need to use to get a good seal and to make sure your food is safe when you're canning at home. You must use mason jars. So there's Ball brand, and if you're in Canada like I am, there's this Bernardin is the Canadian version of Ball. There's a few different brands, but as long as they are a dedicated mason jar meant for home canning, you're fine. Those jars come in various different sizes. We've got like the 4-ounce jelly jar, the 8-ounce jam jar, there's this 8-ounce half pint jar, pints, and then quarts is typically what you're going to see, and then they come with lids that basically you can see the lid is separate because you don't actually even need to keep the band on after you're done canning it, because if it's canned well, then that lid is nice and sealed. So what happens is you've got a lid with 2 different parts. This is the lid, and then here, this part is called the band, and it's separate. So you must use these, and what happens is that, like I say, this lid, once you're done canning, it'll seal right on, so you don't even need to keep this on, and actually you shouldn't, just in case there is any leakage or anything like that, then you'll spot it. But you can then reuse the jars and the bands as long as you clean them and sanitize them well every time, but you cannot reuse the lids. You always have to use brand new lids every time you're canning to ensure a good seal. Just don't be a rebel. Follow the rules when it comes to canning, because you don't want to, have anybody get sick from your home canned food. That kind of negates the whole purpose behind why we can food at home, right? So finally, last safety tip is that you must always follow a safe and tested recipe. So some sources that you can go to make sure that you have a safe and tested recipe that has updated canning methods and procedures. First of all, there's my blog. I make sure that anything that is published on my blog comes from a safe and tested source. Most of the canning recipes on my blog are adapted from the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. Actually, it says Bernardin on this one because I am in Canada, but it's the same book. So another one is that anything Ball, so the Ball Blue Book or the Ball Complete Book of Home Preserving. I love this book. Anything in here or anything by Ball you can trust. And then there's also the National Center for Home Food Preservation. So they are a wealth of information. You can go to their website. They've got all sorts of information on canning and preserving food, as well as recipes on there as well that you can absolutely trust. So those are some great resources. And finally, if you would like to learn more, if you want to kind of take your canning to the next step, whether you are just starting out and have never canned anything before, or you kind of dabbled in canning a little bit and you're ready to kind of level up, maybe you've done some water bath canning, you're ready to start pressure canning, or you want to get your jams and jellies down, or learn how to make a really good pickle, or whatever it is. If you're ready to get into canning, then I also have a very special offer for you right now. So I am launching a brand new home canning course. If you're watching this in real time as this video has been released, we're just mid-July here. This canning course will be launching the last week of July 2020. It is called the Yes You Can Home Canning Course, and we'll be covering everything you need to know about canning safety, canning equipment, water bath canning. We're going to be doing jams and jellies and pickles and pie fillings and applesauce and canned fruit. And then we'll be doing pressure canning as well, and pressure canning chicken stock and vegetables and tomato products, which we'll go over in detail because they can kind of go both ways, tomato products. You can do a little bit of water bath canning, but there's some safety stuff you need to know if you're going to can tomatoes safely in a water bath canner. And I'll also be showing you how to pressure can them, and then even things like how to store your food correctly so that you can prevent spoilage. And then you'll also get access to a bunch of bonuses, cheat sheets, charts, safety guides, and on top of all that, you will gain access to our private Facebook group where you can ask questions and get answers in real time from myself and other members of the group. Share your success stories, support each other. It's just a fantastic environment. I've had a similar Facebook group with my gardening course, and I cannot wait to do it with this canning course as we kind of go through the season and we can up our food together, and I will be available to answer questions in real time as well if you need to know anything as you're going, because canning is one of those things, especially when you're just starting out, where you tend to have a lot of questions, and it's really useful if you don't have anybody in your life that you can ask these to have somebody, to have some sort of a mentor online or somewhere where you can quickly go and ask a question and get an answer, as quickly as possible. But the best part about all of this is that because this is a brand new course that I am launching, most of the video lessons are ready or are just about ready now, but there are a few that are not up quite yet because, of course, we are going through the summer season together here, and not everything is ready for harvest yet. So I'm waiting on a couple things, some green beans and some peaches and tomatoes, of course, to get those last few video lessons up. So most of them are complete, but I'll be adding some more as I go. And because this is a brand new course I'm launching, I am offering my very first group of students a very special one-time only 50% discount off the regular price. So if this sounds like something you're interested in and you want to take advantage of this opportunity, then you can check out the link below and get your name on the wait list for the Yes You Can home canning course. And you'll be the first to know when it launches in just a couple short weeks. I think less than a couple weeks now. I would say about a week and a half until it officially launches. So once again, get your name on the wait list below. Anything else that I've mentioned in this video, I will make sure to link below, as well as links to my in-depth articles on how to get started with water bath canning, how to get started pressure canning without fear, and then as well as the recipe for my cubed pumpkin in a pressure canner, my blueberry pie filling, and any other links, like I said, that I mentioned throughout the video. And of course, if you like this video, then make sure you hit like and subscribe below so you never miss an update from the house and homestead. See you next time.